I am Jimbo Paris, and you are listening to the Jimbo Paris Show. All right, this is Jimbo Paris. Welcome to the Jimbo Paris Show. We have two experts in marriage, and we're going to hear what they have to say about relationships and also general mental health as well. So these are an interesting group of people. They've accomplished a lot of things, and they have some very, very interesting stories. So let's see what they have to say.
Hi there. Thanks for having us on.
Yes, Jimbo, it's an honor to be on your show.
It's an honor as well for me. So, first of all, can you kind of give me a bit of a brief summary of who you all are about, what your message is?
Well, we've been in marriage coaching since 1994, so that's 28 years. And just to give you a little background by that, I was born into a pretty dysfunctional marriage, and father was a doctor. He really did not respect my mother a whole lot, and I thought that was pretty wrong. Really wasn't in a place to really be able to say anything about that until I was older, but there's two things that I knew that I wanted to do. One is I wanted to be a doctor. And the second thing was that I wanted to be married, and I wanted to have a good marriage. And I knew that the marriage that my parents had was not good. So I made it my mission to, when I was old enough to do something about it, that I would. And so Vanessa and I got together, and I'll let her give her part.
So prior to meeting Dr. Jeep, I was previously married, and I was clearly in a relationship that I felt like a single partner. The relationship was just me. There were addictions with alcohol. I was very young when I married. I was 21 years old, and I say I could lead that horse to water, but I couldn't make him drink. And in other words, it takes two to make a relationship. And when one person isn't willing to do it, then, you either decide that you live with that or you move on. And because I was so young and I knew that I didn't want to bring children into a dysfunctional marriage, I decided to move on. And I moved to Pittsburgh. Fast forward some time later, I met Dr. Jeep. And what happened in that period of, which was about 9 years through the relationship with my ex-husband and the marriage, was I got to learn more about myself and what I really wanted out of a marriage, because I clearly knew what I wasn't getting. So I was able to decipher what I needed. And so when, my goal was, when I started dating, that, there were things that I was clearly going to want in a person. So check off the boxes, so to speak. And so when I met...
And of course, I checked off on all of them.
So I wanted someone that would talk to me and have intelligent conversations with me, and just be very kind and gentle, but have the capacity to love deeply, and also have the capacity and the desire to want to work on the relationship.
Vanessa was pretty broken when I met her, but I was able to see through all of that, and I knew that there was a really good person. I mean, she had been through not physical abuse, but a lot of emotional abuse, verbal abuse. And, it's hard to stick with that for several years and not be affected by it. So,
may I interrupt you for a minute here?
Go ahead.
Lots of shame coming from that. I was raised a Catholic, and I was raised to believe that you marry one time. tremendous amount of shame. In fact, I think that's why I stuck it out for over 5 years. But I was literally being tortured on a daily basis, and coming out of that relationship, it just was very traumatic for me. So
we got married, and really before we got married, we had decided that when there was time after we did get married, that we were going to start into marriage coaching. So we got married in 92 and we started into coaching in 94. Did training in 94 and started that, went on. And in 2018, we've come to specialize in physician and healthcare professional relationships. We still do general marriage coaching, but we specialize in that. And I think, to cut to your question, Jimbo, our message is that it's okay to admit that there's a problem. It's okay to admit that you're not perfect. It's okay to admit, especially if you have a desire to keep your relationship together. And that's what we're here for, is to help people with that. Many people have good relationships, but they want to make them better. Other people are further along. They've been apart emotionally for a while, but we also deconstruct that and get back to the point where that started to fall apart, and then move them forward again.
Excellent. And great summary. And, Vanessa kind of raised a good point for a question that I have. How do you begin moving on?
It was so difficult. I really appreciate your question. It was because I loved him. But he just wasn't marriage material for me. And unfortunately, I didn't figure that out until I was married to him. I had to get to the point where I realized that being alone was better than being lonely in that marriage with a partner that wasn't willing to meet me on my level. And just one day at a time, picking myself up from the bootstraps and having faith that there was a person out there for me, that I was going to find someone and, just keep plugging.
I believe that our relationship was meant to happen. And I'll give you the reason for that. As Vanessa said, she was a Catholic. I'm a Catholic. And for a long time, because of Catholic dogma, that I was not going to marry a divorced woman. I wasn't, because it was very important for me to be able to get married in the church. And so I thought one day, reflected, and thought that to myself that really that's not a fair thing to do. There's lots of reasons why relationships break up. And so I made that decision that I was no longer going to hold myself to that standard. And wouldn't you know, the first person that I dated was Vanessa. And it just all came together from that. So, like I said, she had a lot of issues that carried over into our relationship and into our marriage.
And I'll give you an example. Because I was traumatized from alcohol, anytime that he started drinking, I would be like, do you really have to drink? Do you, it raised the hair on my head, so to speak. And he would explain, I don't have a drinking problem. When I choose to drink, it's because I'd like to have one, and, so on and so forth. So I, over time, had to work with that and reduce the fear. And of course, over time, the fear of him drinking or being an alcoholic, because, what's going through my mind is, oh God, I've just met another alcoholic. But over time, I proved that wrong.
And I would say to her, honey, I'm not your ex-husband. I don't have a everlasting desire to drink every day.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy having one,
Mm-hmm.
every several days. And, but I understood where this fear was coming from. So it's a matter of understanding, and then her understanding my point of view, and meeting in the middle, which is exactly what happened.
Meeting in the middle, and also him having the empathy to really feel and understand that fear that I had, and be willing to just talk softly and with a whole lot of understanding and say, I know where this is coming from. I'm not him. And that reassurance, that empathy made me feel very much more comfortable and understood, most importantly.
Excellent. And, from what I'm getting from a lot of this sounds pretty interesting, because do you consider yourselves Catholic marriage coaches?
That's a very, very good question. Over the years, I'm an accountant by profession, was trained in accounting, and unfortunately had the coincidence of working for Catholic organizations. And because of that, I am a very bad Catholic. So is our marriage coaching program Catholic? No, absolutely not.
No, we do not. We do not pretend to assume or project on anybody that we, that we coach.
Whatever they believe
exactly
in is what they believe in. And we have had to navigate this religion in between us, because he is still a devout Catholic and I am not. And that raised some conflict. And we really had to sit with that and come to an understanding that I had experiences that just not only changed my mind, but I just call myself Christian. And he is respectful enough of me that we respect each other's positions.
And this is something, Jimbo, that, because again, a very good question. This is something, if there's an issue between the two of you from a faith or a religious perspective, this is something that you need to talk about substantively before you get married. And unfortunately, couples that are engaged really don't talk about things that are substantive. It's more like things that they like to do, like to go to dinner, or like to hang out with friends, or what book do you like, or what kind of movies do you like? And if they talk about something that is uncomfortable, it tends to be put off because they don't want to go there because of the discomfort. Unfortunately, what happens is some of this discomfort could be really a deal breaker, and they don't want to have to deal with something that may be a deal breaker. So they put it off until after marriage. The honeymoon phase is gone. All the attraction that's there, that really is the initial thing that brings you together, is starting to fade. Not that it's not there, but it's starting to fade. And real life hits you in the face.
Right.
This problem is still there, but now it's a problem you have as a married couple.
So we're huge advocates of premarital coaching, talking to folks, educating folks about that. if there's a stumbling block that you have, decide if that is a deal breaker. For example, in my with my ex-husband, had I known that drinking was going to be what it was, that of course would have been a deal breaker. Had I known that he was not interested in, working in the future if we had problems, that would have been a deal breaker. But of course, you gain wisdom with time and age, and there was a lot that I had to learn, and I made mistakes, unfortunately.
So those are just a few things. Another thing I would say is children. And the thing with our coaching is that in our coaching, we talk about ourselves and all of these pain points that couples deal with. We've experienced almost all of them. And we talk about it freely when, in our coaching to help them feel almost like a symbiosis with us that, while this is their, ours problems, they've had those too. And this is how they've gotten through it. So,
right. And they're not insurmountable, and they don't have to split us up.
And so that was the big issue with Vanessa and I is, it wasn't that we didn't want to have kids, but it was a matter of how many. And she had lots of misgivings about having more than one, fear of not being a good mother. She came from a small family. I came from a larger one. I wanted more kids. But what did we do? We
kicked the can down the road.
It was uncomfortable.
Right.
She would cry. I would feel bad. And so we decided, well, we'll
work it out.
It did work out, but not without a lot of pain, not without a lot of hurt,
conflict.
And to her, I respect her so much for a lot of reasons, but she moved more towards me. And instead of having one, we ended up having 3 kids that we're just so incredibly proud of and blessed with. And that was her coming more towards my way of thinking. And it was a decision that she made in love. We'll always be thankful for that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this, what you're both saying here kind of goes perfectly into the next question I have to ask. How does marriage counseling help empower families in general, especially in helping children?
Well, what I want to be clear about is this is not counseling. We're not professional counselors. We are coaches. So there is a definite distinction.
The distinction would be like I was telling you that we model ourselves. Going to a therapist, there's a professional boundary there that a therapist is not going to be able to, to talk about her own relationship. Therapists tend to deal with a lot in the past, psychological issues. For instance, if addiction was a big problem with a couple that came to us, we're not addiction therapists. We're not addiction counselors. Now, we would continue to coach, but we would coach in conjunction with an addiction therapist. So there are certain things that we need to stay away from or allow it to be the purview of somebody that deals with this more often.
Think of us like educators. We've been, doing this for a long time. We've learned a lot about, the pros of the tips and the tricks, so to speak, and evidence-based practices, best practices. For example, ways of communication. And one of the huge topic that we talk about is words, like and rules for arguing. And for example, words can really either build you up or destroy you. And I came from a family where it was tearing down words tearing me apart happened, and it was accepted in our family. It just should never have been. And so, but I understood how badly that made me feel. And so one of the topics that we teach about is how when you use words, like for example, you're lazy, or you're this, or you're that. When you are using the word you in front of a comment, it is, for the most part, downgrading the other person.
Exactly.
And it puts them on the defensive.
And as a coach, couples, when they come to us, have an idea of what they want to see happen with their relationship. When they fill out a needs assessment to come to see us, they want to be able to get to a certain point. So what we do is we facilitate that to happen. Couples that are in therapy, they're completely confused. Things that possibly happened in childhood need to be dug up and addressed. And that is not something that we do. We it's looking forward instead of backwards. So deeply. Right. We look back a little bit, but like I said, most couples have an idea of what they want to see. And in therapy, that's really not the case.
Okay, so just so I can understand the difference, what problem would I go to for you that a therapist probably would not be able to provide, or a counselor?
Good question. For example, you have been married for a while and you love each other deeply. You don't communicate as well as you used to. You seem to be arguing a little bit more. What you would do is come to a coach to be taught communication skills. And an example of an example of also reconnection if you're disconnecting, because if you're arguing a lot, you tend to have disconnected. So what we do is we teach you how to reconnect with each other. And we do that in a process that we call the love huddle, which is teaching you how to write to each other in a very non-threatening way so that your feelings are really understood by your partner. And when they're understood by the partner, then there is empathy and a willingness to change whatever you need to change to make the relationship better.
And when we start to delve in, like I'd said before about deconstructing, if we find that there is a history or an ongoing history of physical abuse, verbal abuse, addiction, then we send them to a professional for that. And so it's something that if that is occurring, that's something that has to be taken care of, dealt with, possibly medication involved if there's mental illness. And once all of that is taken care of, then they come back and we move forward. And they can't move forward until those things are dealt with first. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just to clarify a bit more, do you have relationships with counselors as well? And do you work in tandem with them and refer them to them if you can't handle something?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely.
And we know when something is out of bounds for us. We know that there's something that needs to be gone into a little bit more deeply. Now, as a physician, when I was in practice, I did a lot of counseling. I was trained that way, but am I a certified therapist? No. So it's because I'm not a certified therapist, it's not something that I really should do in the context of of our coaching practice. It's not fair to the couples, especially if there are pretty significant issues that they have not dealt with enough. And so that is why specifically, we do coaching. It's sometimes the lines get a little bit blurred, but there are therapists who send clients to us because we're coaches. It's something that they don't want to necessarily deal with because they have more pressing issues. Like I said, dealing with mental illness and then possibly coordinating with a psychiatrist. And that is far much more than that we should be involved with the couples. We see that occasionally when they come to us, but those aren't issues that we see regularly. Occasionally we do have to refer, but most of the time those kind of significant issues don't exist.
And what does a really good job of letting us know, because before we work with a couple, they fill out a questionnaire and then we meet them. And then we decide if we're a good fit moving forward. We listen to what they have to say. We listen to what their short-term goals are, what their long-term goals are, and we see if we're a good fit for them. If we're not a good fit, of course, we don't move forward.
Like an example, one of the questions in the needs assessment is, what do you consider your primary problem to be? Now, if a woman is filling that out and she says, well, my husband beats the hell out of me, that is not that's not for us to handle. No. So we're going to get in touch with them and say, yes, this is a significant issue, but this is something that you need to find out between the two of you. Why is this happening? And that could involve something that happened in the past. And again, and
provide resources.
Exactly.
Provide resources for them to be able to take care of themselves. And if they're not in a safe environment, refer them to the local areas that provide help in that area.
Because those kind of issues sometimes can take years to get through. And that's just, that's not what we do. Something that's going to take that long is not something that that we're comfortable with handling, but it's really not fair to them because we're trying to progress them forward towards goals that they have, not working on all this that they need to get handled before they come to see us.
Okay. So
does that make any better sense?
Yeah, and you sort of already half answered my next question, but what is considered your ideal client and sort of the client that's not ideal?
Our ideal client is a client that they love each other deeply. They've been married they're out of the honeymoon stage. So maybe they've got a child and they just need tools because their relationship's changing. The reality is changing, and maybe they just need tools in order to be able to navigate a change in their life. That's our best client. So what they're looking for is, ways to not argue, ways to communicate with each other so that they're not tearing each other down, but they're building each other up, that they're able to communicate and that they understand each other, that they're getting their needs and their wants met out of the relationship. That
they have an awareness. They have, their relationship is pretty decent. There's definitely love that's there. Now that can be to varying degrees, and respect for the most part, but they realize that there's a problem. And they're having a difficult time navigating through it. And so they need somebody to help them navigate through that?
An example is, society tries to tell us that if you've lost that love and feeling, so to speak, that you should get divorced. For example, if you're not in love with your spouse, that's a reason to get divorced. Well, there are a number of reasons that you may not feel the love for your spouse. And that's just it. It's a feeling. And feelings are neither right nor wrong. They can change with the days, change with the hours, whatever. And that's what we teach, that love really is a feeling, that there's more to a marriage relationship than thinking that you don't love them anymore.
And so there's love, but there has to be a lot of things underneath for that love to happen. Like, are you vulnerable with each other? Do you respect each other? Do you trust each other? If those three things don't exist, or somehow that they've been lost, then we, again, deconstruct to find out exactly why that happened, when it happened, and say, well, what drew you together to begin with?
Right. Why did you get married in the first place?
A big thing is, are you best friends? Because in our opinion, that's why we call our practice best friends again. Because if you're not friends first, if you're not best friends, and you're truly drawn to somebody by physical attraction and not anything else, then you're going to have a lot of issues. And so it's important to be able to know those things and to be able to go back and say, okay, this is why you got married. And then this happened. Why did it happen? Because sometimes they may not even know.
Life just happens to us.
It may just be a gradual process that, how did we get to this point?
It really can be insidious. And something as simple as someone that works long hours, they're just not able to spend the time together that they used to. And so they find themselves drifting apart. And it's really no fault of each other. It's a work-life balance. So then, we suggest ways that they can navigate their work-life balance and get them back on track.
Speaking of that, you also do what sort of approaches do you sort of teach people generally? So you mentioned a 3-month break.
3-month break?
The program.
We have a 3-month program. No, not a 3-month.
So tell him about the program.
Our program is called 90 Days to Clarity and Connection. And the first month we work on clarifying. You would take a look at yourself. What do you really want? When you were little, what were your dreams of married life? What kind of dreams did you have about it? How are those dreams matching reality? Is that causing conflict? And then we work on clarity as a couple. When you were engaged before you were married, what kind of goals did you have for yourself? Where did you see your life going? If that disconnected, what do you want to get back to? And then the third is working on them together. I'm sorry.
That's all right. And you would be surprised, Jimbo, when we have couples that come to us, you ask that question. Have you discussed what you really want? Have you discussed what you really need? And you would be surprised the number of couples that say, well, we really never talked about that. We felt good about each other. So, we thought marriage was just something, and it was a given. It was a next step, but they really didn't talk about those things. So it's kind of got lost in the shuffle. So yeah, there's a stepwise progression. And go ahead and finish what you were going to say.
So then the second month of our program, we work on challenges of a relationship, like being vulnerable to each other, learning to trust each other. And then the third month of our program, we work with sexuality, sexual empowerment, consent. We talk about consent. We also talk about needs and wants. We talk about feelings. Like, for example, how do you want to feel when you're having sex or making love? What, do you want to feel precious? Do you want to feel taken care of? Or do you want to feel like you're totally in charge and, so on and so forth. So usually after the 90 days and going through the program, there's a whole lot of reconnecting that and tools that they have in their arsenal moving forward that they can use when life throws curveballs at you.
What's your desire? And if your desire is low, why has that happened? Is it for medical reasons,
right,
which we know happens with age? Or is there another reason why the desire has gone down? Or changes in preferences that once were there, that were shared by both of you, and then all of a sudden now it's not. Why has that occurred? Is it because of age, or is it for other reasons that you may not even be aware of? And talking about sex, there's in a program like what we have, typically that is if that's a problem, which again with the assessments that couples fill out, I don't remember of one that has not talked about sex being an issue, that they are dissatisfied with their sex life. So we feel that is something that is key, that needs to be talked about, because studies show that if your sex life is good, the amount of time in your relationship is about 15%. You're satisfied with it, and it's something that goes on correctly, nicely, you're both happy. But if it's not, it consumes 80%, if not more. And
usually
because
fuels,
of
usually fuels argument, resentment, disconnection, all the disses that you can imagine going on between a couple. If their sex life is not good, that is a recipe for disaster, really.
It's not an easy thing to talk to couples about. Sometimes they're embarrassed, they're wanting to stay close to the vest, but it's something that we ease into and
teach them how to talk about it with each other in a more loving way, instead of you blah 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 blah. No, you're in a partnership together and you want to treat them the way that you want to be treated. So if you want your partner to be open and honest with you, in what way can they explain it so you totally understand, but you don't become defensive? And then you're willing to work on it because you want what's best for your partner and also what's best for you as a couple.
Is there an emotional connection there? Or is it wham, bam, thank you, man? Has that changed from an emotional connection to, okay, 5 minutes, done, turn over, go to bed, turn off the light, boom. And if that's the issue, why is it the issue?
Yeah. And so what do you really want?
Exactly.
When it comes to relationships in general, how do you begin to understand what you want?
Awareness is huge. Everyone usually has an idea when they're a child based on the type of relationship that they grew up in. For example, my father was the patriarch of the family. I grew up in an extremely traditional Italian family. He was the boss. What he said goes. I saw, my mom just would have to listen and to prevent him from going into a rage. And so I really came out of that feeling like I didn't have a voice. So of course, when I thought about my future spouse, I wanted someone that I was going to be able to talk to. I wanted to have equal share in the relationship. If he said something and I didn't agree with it, I wanted to be able to voice my disagreement. Unfortunately, we either copy what we grew up in, or we're aware enough to make the change. I, unfortunately, my first husband copied what I had grown up with. Then from that, took the time to learn. Of course, I was going to counseling, learning what not to duplicate in my next relationship.
And just to dovetail with what Vanessa said, self-awareness is so huge, because sometimes we lose that. And I'll give you an example. I, had always said that, I don't want a marriage like my parents. But there have been times that I have started to emulate habits of my dad, and I'm not thinking about it. I'm not aware of it. Fortunately, our relationship is what Vanessa can come to me to have the courage to confront me and say, that's something your dad would have done. And I'm not intentionally doing it, but she brings it to my awareness. I think about it and I say, yeah, you're right about that.
Sometimes it's not that easy. We're normal, we're human, we're a normal couple. We have arguments. He gets defensive, but it's like I said, using those tools, making sure that when I'm really angry at him, I don't use swear words or degrading words. It's like we hold ourselves accountable to each other, in line with each other. For example, I just know that's not a good place to go. So because that's not a good place to go, I check myself and hold on to myself and find other ways of venting that anger as opposed to venting it on him.
I call it compassionate intuition, which means that you not to be offended. Now, is that always going to happen? No, because you're human. Sometimes you're going to get offended. Sometimes you're going to get angry. That happens. But by assuming, or that's not a good word, by compassionately knowing or understanding that what you're hearing from your partner or spouse is meant in love. It's not meant to be to down you, to significantly criticize you. It's to help you understand things that you may not be aware of.
And going through marriage it's a growth making process. You're both growing from it. And sometimes you've got to go through hard things, and out of that comes growth. Out of that comes a deeper love. Out of that comes more joy and a better commitment. Definitely a stronger commitment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And I understand also that you're both, in essence, entrepreneurs as well. So how did, both of these skill sets of yours come together? I think one person's an accountant, the other's a physician, right? So how did you bring those two things together to sort of build this business?
Well, I'll take this first. I come from the time that the brick and mortar, I was, especially when I was a practicing physician, it was, people would come to me and they would sit down, I would talk to them. And they would listen to what I thought the problem was. They would also listen to what my treatment plan was. would observe my bedside manner and then decide, well, I like this guy. I'm going to come back to him, or no, I don't care for him. I don't like what he said. And if they liked me, then they would, tell their family and friends, and then that's how things kind of were. And this is different. This is, the digital space. We're talking virtually, and this has been something that that we've had to get used to. And Vanessa, being an accountant and more savvy from a digital computer point of view, she takes on the majority of that. Now I do.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do a lot of writing and fine tuning, and so it's a collaboration as far as how we're doing that.
As far as our background in it, we started out in the 90s in the volunteer realm and did that for over 25 years. So we worked that volunteer area doing our private jobs until we made the decision that we were going to do this full time, because this was really our heart's desire.
And when you're, we want to create a legacy of helping as many couples as we can. And so when you're trying to, connect with couples that potentially have issues, it's, like I said before, it's a very private type of thing. They have to gain trust with you, and it's just understanding ways to do that, because the couples that have kind of hung around, so to speak, before they commit often will say, I don't know why I was waiting so long, but it's just something that is intensely personal. It's difficult to talk about.
And
so,
also fear of, what am I going to find out that I don't want to know?
That too. So it's they're so happy that they've came and taken our program, and like I said, wondered what took it so long. Although we understand completely about that. So it's trying to get clients and potential clients to understand that we have their best interests at heart, and all we want to do is to help them get the type of marriage that they really want to have.
And the most gratifying thing is to see couples at the beginning, they're afraid, they're not talking a whole lot. Lots of communication is done with writing, and they're writing. And then towards the, first few weeks of the program, to see physically how, you could just see their body language and they're coming together, and to see that is just so gratifying to us.
Great. And speaking of, gratifying situations and so forth, Jeff, were you, I was reading this interesting story about the Grenada Invasion. Can you kind of give me a bit of a spiel on that story?
Jimbo, it happened, let's see, almost 40 years ago. When I was in college, as I said, I wanted to be, always had wanted to be a physician, and just was, my grades were good. My entrance exams were good, but at the time that I was trying to get in, there were lots of people that had higher scores on the entrance exam, and had higher grade point averages than I did, and so I was not able to get in the time frame that I wanted to, and so I was pretty despondent about all of that. And so my dad found out about this place in the Caribbean, Grenada, that had a school there called St. George's. And so in one day, I went out and interviewed, and I was accepted. And so this was, so to speak, where the rubber kind of met the road. Am I going to do this? I was a kid that in a lot of ways had a silver spoon in his mouth, and was I going to leave and go to a third world destitute country? Am I going to be able to adapt and adjust to that? And the decision I made was, yeah, I want to be a doctor. I want to help. And so I went over there, and yes, it was when I landed at the airport, and there were people that were on the outside of the fences looking in, and I could see, they're looking like I came from an area where the streets were paved with gold, and I could understand that. I mean, these people, God bless them, had a lot of them didn't have anything. They were living in block houses with tin roofs, and what it did to me is my perspective about my my fortune to have been born in the country where I was living, and to have what I had. I just became so much more thankful for that realization. I didn't end up graduating there, but it was someplace that I needed to go to really ground me more. And I will always be thankful that I did that. And
the invasion.
And then, you wanting to know about the invasion? Well, and yeah, it was it happened in 1983, and it started out that the prime minister of the country had been promised through a collaboration with a different country, Cuba, that the things were going to happen to benefit his people. He's very, very, very popular amongst the people. Was looked at as like a man of the people. And as it turned out, those things weren't happening that he was promised. And as it turned out, the interest that Cuba had was to basically make Grenada a military satellite. And he started to realize that. And so he made overtures to other countries to try to get them to invest in Grenada. Well, the people in his government who saw that didn't want that, didn't like that. And so they put him out under house arrest, tortured him, beat him. People found out about that and went to his house, broke through his gate, freed him, took him to downtown St. George's, the capital. And so then the military took over, and he was tortured, killed. People in his government that were sympathetic to him, same thing happened to them. And I was back in my dorm, standing there looking into town, watching all of this happen, knowing that something horrible had happened. And the people that were working, that were Grenadians, they were all crying. And so they all had an idea that something horrible had happened, which indeed it had. And so there was a radio blackout, and finally something came on a few hours later, and it was the head of the military who said that he had taken over, and that the Prime Minister, Maurice Bishop, had been killed, and that he deserved it. And then he said, from now on, until he said differently, there was going to be a 24-hour shoot-on-sight curfew. So needless to say, we were all scared to death. And the thing that we were trying to make happen was that we would be able to fly off the island. And so Grenada didn't have a attaché, because there were no diplomatic relations with the U.S. So the closest one was with Barbados. And so the emissary came over, talked to the military government, who was walking the streets with machine guns. And so talks broke down when the military said that they could not guarantee safe passage to the airport. And so when that broke down the very next day, that's when the invasion occurred. I woke up 5 o'clock in the morning to the sound of anti-aircraft fire right outside the dormitory that I was staying in. And so over the next 2 days, it was a matter of waiting it out until they were able to get to us and fly us out. And I was in a dorm right on the ocean. And before they flew us out, they were shooting shells above us from a destroyer out there. And it was pretty horrific. And then we were flown off with aircraft or with ground fire coming up at the helicopter as we were flown off. And so it was a pretty difficult ordeal to go through. But again, it was something that has helped to shape and mold me as a person.
Excellent. And great story. Definitely adds a lot. But I know we're getting close to the end, so I want to take a quick glance at your website. So technical team, please bring up the website. We'll take a glance at it. Okay, so please sort of just kind of take the lead here, run us through everything, and kind of show everyone how to sort of navigate this website that you both made.
Okay. Well, of course, welcome. We are best friends again with Dr. Jeep and Vanessa. And our mission is to reignite your marriage. We specialize with physicians and healthcare providers. However, anyone that is interested in our program, feel free to connect with us. You can click on the Work With Us button and be taken to a scheduler. We take intake calls, however much time you need on that call to speak with us, question and answer. And then blogs. We have, of course, some blogs. Our featured on page where we've been featured on numerous podcasts, and how to contact us. Also our social media and where you can find us.
There's also a place when you scroll down that if you would like a free copy of Chapter 9, which Vanessa wrote, which is about the Love Huddle, you're able to download that and get that. And that clients have felt that was extremely helpful.
We're in the process of redesigning the space for podcasts. We have probably 20 that we have to add to the site. But there is the book, What's Forever For, and you can click on the free copy.
And
link.
The important thing that I would like your listeners to know about the book is that, the name of the book, the title is What's Forever For, A Physician's Guide to Everlasting Love and Success in Marriage. Now, it's from my perspective, but it's meant for everyone. It's written in a way that regardless of your socioeconomic background or your level of education, that it's an easy read. And I wrote it purposely. And I wrote it as if I was sitting talking to a patient and getting, to try to get them to understand and be able to take something away from reading the book. And people that have read it have told me that I've achieved that. It's been an award-winning book, which I'm very proud of. And it's not only good for relationships, partnerships, but it's just a good book to have in any relationship you have with people, because the tools are widely meant and have been used for friendships, for relating to the public. The principles there are applicable to all of those.
And then there's a link to take a free relationship needs assessment. So listeners can click on that link and fill that out. If they're interested in us getting back with them, we do so. And, it goes right into the scheduling program.
And the call is no obligation. It's just a discovery call to go over the relationship assessment, see if
we're a good fit,
further explanation of the program, to see if if it's something that they want to do, and then we kind of go from there.
Okay, great. Now, to just kind of call it back here, are there any final words you'd like to say to the audience before I let you off here?
Yeah, we just want to let folks know that, if it takes two people to make a relationship work, and neither one is more important than the other. It's a partnership, it's a team. And that if the two of you are willing to work on your relationship, then it's absolutely doable, and to not lose hope. We're in the practice of highly recommending marriage and avoiding divorce at all costs, because it is very traumatic. So therefore, that's our mission.
What I say is to couples, and what I would say is, don't feel like you are the only person or the only couple that is going through this. There are so many out there. It's really difficult to estimate. So I know that it's difficult. I understand that it can be embarrassing, but try and take the step, and I promise that you will not be disappointed.
Yeah.
And along with that is, don't suffer in silence. Do something about it. Things can get better.
Yes.
And
we're all human.
Exactly.
We're all human. We have come from we're taking two separate backgrounds and merging them together. And how could there not be conflict as a result of that? So it's just navigating that in healthy ways. And we teach healthy ways of navigating that.
Exactly.
Excellent. And again, before we end it off here, I just got to let out a few sponsors here. So the first sponsor we have is Dark Joseph Ravine. He is an excellent man. He is focused on improving the lives of people, taking people out of the dark ravine, and helping build a more positive life for everyone. He's a great sponsor. Even though he's not a paid sponsor, he still publishes things and gets our name out there. The next person I'd like to talk about is going to be the Six Figure University, focused on helping people grow their budget, grow more money. Two expert people, one's an engineer, one's an expert salon owner, really helping you out there. So go online, fill out their form, and you can also get some advice from them.
Great.
Excellent.
Yep. Then the final person is LifeWork Systems. They work together as well with other businesses to help improve their own business relationships too. It's basically extreme HR. And if you're interested in this offer too, by Judy Ryan, check her out as well.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Final thing we got is a new website. We're on Roku now. This episode too is going to be on Roku too. So
good.
And stay tuned for that.
That is a never-ending thing to work on. Websites.
But you do great work, Jimbo. We're a fan, and we're just so grateful and honored that you've had us on as guests.
Appreciate it very much.
No problem. Thank you too. And
thank you.
Again, I'm Jimbo Paris. This is the Jimbo Paris Show. Thanks again, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Jimbo Paris Show.